right, I would say let's get started. Thank you all for showing up in such huge numbers. I'm impressed. Isn't it good to be back here in Barcelona, as I said yesterday already? It's nice. So, give me a quick hands. Who was in the talk of me and Oliver yesterday? Just raise your hands. Okay, quite a few folks. For those who weren't there, don't worry. I have included the most important messages which I have sent out there in this slide deck as well, so you won't get lost. No worries, all will be good. Yesterday we talked about modularization, some general ideas, and I mean, we all heard that at university when we learned programming and so on and so forth. Sometimes we forget about some of those principles. Fair enough, there's so much new stuff pumping into our brains all the time. That's a good thing. But when we talk about modularity, a question that I get very often is, how do I identify those boundaries? I mean, the concepts are cool, but how do I actually do it? And that's what we want to do today. And there is a thing called domain-driven design, something that is not very new at all, old stuff, 19 years old, crazy, isn't it? And but with a very active community, and that community always produces new ideas how to improve the work and so on. And what I try to tell you or explain to you in this talk today is, I would say, the current status in 2022. Yeah, there's a lot of new stuff, a lot of open source stuff on GitHub, on the Creative Commons licenses, and so on. I'll show you all that stuff in this talk. Just a few words about myself. I'm Michael. I work for a company called InnoQ, which is basically a consulting software delivery company. I would consider myself to be a member of the DDD community. I'm also a part of that organization here on GitHub, and I like doing conference talks quite a bit, so here I am. Separation of concerns, is an idea where we divide a complex systems into a bunch of responsibilities. Something you probably all heard about. Those of you who were in the talk yesterday heard quite a bit about that, but I think that's something that most of you have already heard. And modularity is a specialization of separation of concerns, with a key focus on stuff like information hiding, loose coupling, high cohesion, and all these good old design principles. Now, how do we achieve that? One idea for doing that is domain-driven design. So what we are usually pretty good at, especially when we look at separation of concerns, is the separation into technical concerns. Like layered architecture, onion architecture, clean architecture, hexagonal architecture. On a technical, horizontal level, we are pretty good at that. This idea here, published 19 years ago in this phenomenal book, but also hard to read book by Eric Evans, is an idea for, or contains ideas for modularization on a vertical level, on a vertical slicing. And there are, I would say, two key modularization concepts in domain-driven design. One is the bounded context, the other one is the aggregate. And it also emphasizes that we need to do design domain modeling in an iterative fashion. I mean, who comes up with a proper design for a complex system? That's what DDD does address in the first run. Is there someone of you who does that? Good for you. Great. Congrats. So most of us aren't capable of doing that. So, and in the DDD space, we talk about modularity on a first-hand in a construct called bounded context. I would call that a rather coarse-grained module. Usually when you work with microservice architectures or specialization of that, like stuff like self-contained systems, you usually cut the deployment units along bounded context. And please don't mix these concepts up. The bounded context is a domain boundary. A microservice is a deployment boundary, the boundary of a deployment unit, something that you deploy independently. Don't mix these up. If you take a look at the idea of modulifs, what Oliver Drotbaum is talking about quite a bit, Yeah, that's basically a big deployment boundary which can contain a bunch of bounded contexts. So you never implement something as a bounded context, you model a bounded context. A bounded context is basically a boundary around the domain module. And in that thing, we have a finer-grained option for granularity. Those are the aggregates. And this talk aims to explain to you how to model these things. Yeah? So basically, we start off with bounded contexts. And now the first hint, when you leave this call, I'm still stuck in the remote world. That was a good one. Now, when you leave this talk here, oh God, you may want to check out this organization on GitHub. It's called DDD Crew, github.com/DDD Crew. Under this organization, the active part of the domain-driven design community, I would say there are 10 to 20 contributors. Yeah, they are publishing work, and everything there is Creative Commons. So, for instance, this visualization, so we have published a description, DDD starter modeling process. A lot of people ask, how do I get started? Check this out. Yeah, that's a good idea, good resource. Also contains Miro templates. So if you want to do modeling on Miro, you can download board backups for templates and stuff like that. Good stuff there. And I want to do this talk along this DDD starter modeling process. We won't touch point on anything there. So in this talk, we will not talk about understanding business models and user needs. Pro tip to you as developers, please do that. Try to understand why your organization and how your organization is earning money with the software you write. I think it will lead to very good and sensible design decisions. Good idea. We don't have time for that. I'd love to talk an hour about that as well. We also won't talk about make or buy decisions, strategic thinking, and organizational aspects, aligning teams. That's not what we're going to do. But we will jump head first, yeah, into this discovery part now in this talk. Now, what Alberto Brandolini, a very smart guy from Bologna in Italy, who is the inventor of a method called event storming, which we will check out in this talk, once said, it's not the expert's knowledge of the domain experts that goes into production. It's the mostly implicit assumptions in your brains as developers about a certain domain that goes into production. Yeah? Usually why do projects fail? Usually we're pretty good at technical things. Yeah? I mean, of course, you're all using Spring, so we're all good on the tech side. Yeah, perfect. But projects very often fail due to a mismatch of assumptions and stuff like that. Yeah? And that's a very smart quote. And very often we are faced with this situation. It's all good. We all have a shared understanding. Really? Let's check this out. One method, yeah, and this domain expert knowledge is totally essential for domain-driven design. Yeah, so you need to talk to your business people for finding good vertical module boundaries. That's the first thing you should take away. Yeah, and sometimes you can say, oh, I've got a bunch of requirements engineers. Yeah? And they do that for me. Some of you have kids, I'm pretty sure. And at a birthday party for the kids, sometimes in Germany we have a game called Stille Post, Silent Post. So we line up one kid, another kid, another kid, another kid, and we whisper a story into the ear of one of the kids. And the kids are supposed to whisper the story further, further, and further. And after the fifth kid, everyone laughs. What utter nonsense is coming out? This happens in software as well, but no one is laughing there. Yeah? No one considers that to be funny. Yeah? So what you want to have is that the last kid really chats to the first kid. I'm sorry for those who have to work with SAFe, yeah? Because in SAFe you have a very big distance sometimes. Yeah? Now, we need direct collaboration, but how do we do that? Yeah? What could possibly go wrong? Yeah? Let's check this out, and I'm going to be super sarcastic now. I don't want to offend any developers here. So we have this hotel room here. Yeah? That was one in Switzerland, I think. How would usual business folks name these things here? Yeah, something like window, trolley, TV, chair, desk, painting. Now let's imagine we implement this room as a code base. What do we very often see in code bases? And I'm being really evil now, like that. Yeah? I see class names like Transparency Factory, Decorator Impl, Entertainment Provider Singleton, Work Enablement Device, Rollable Stuff Container, or REST Provider, or something like that. Yeah? And sometimes that language even leaks to the business, and the business starts talking that language as well. Yeah? That's a very nice source of a lot of evil out there. Yeah? Now, what we want to have in DDD is we want to achieve a ubiquitous language, a shared language that we speak together, which becomes the basis, yeah, for the domain model in that modules. Yeah? I want to see that language in drawings. I want to see it in the documentation. And I want to see that language in the code so that I have a class or a module called TV and not Entertainment Provider Singleton. I mean, that sounds really smart. Yeah, I mean, you can say, oh, okay, then we need to implement the Entertainment Provider Singleton, and everyone else in the meeting is like, oh, that's a smart person here. Seriously, yeah? Now, one way to facilitate that is a method called event storming. Please raise your hand. Who has done some event storming already? Next year, I want to see more hands here. That's a great workshop. So basically, you get together a bunch of folks. This room would be super cool for an event storming because we have a very long wall in the back over there. Yeah? A very long one. And you need many sticky notes and many pens and stuff like that. And what you start with, you explore the domain and you think about domain events that can happen. Yeah? So stuff like application corrected, in-depth validation done, loan granted, loan not granted, signed contract answered, and not REST template initialized or something like that. We want to focus on business events, and we want to collect them in a brainstorming fashion. After that, we sort them in an order so that we can tell a story. This is not technical at all. Everyone can participate in those workshops. Yeah? Everyone can participate. I think that's a very easy thing. Yeah? And I've even seen blind persons participating. Yeah, just put someone next to them and they write the sticky notes and put them on the wall where they see them fit. That works. That's good. Yeah? And this can ignite discussions. And there you will see a bunch of misunderstandings because they are explicitly on the wall. Good stuff. And after that, we try to identify so-called pivotal events. Events that are really important. Yeah? So, for instance, for Sergey and his amazing team, yeah, props to everyone involved here in this conference. Yeah, ticket purchased. Yeah? Speaker slot confirmed. Those are more important events than session abstract checked out, for instance. Yeah? Or if you configure a new laptop, yeah? RAM added, hard disk added, processor chosen, screen size chosen, all good stuff. But laptop purchased, that's a really important thing. I mean, you can configure as many of your dream MacBooks as you want. As long as you don't buy them, it's totally uninteresting for Apple and it basically costs them money. Yeah? So you try to identify them. And maybe you also showcase some parallel streams over there. Yeah? And take a look at that, at those events. What do you think are some pivotal events there? Yeah, so we have an application filled out, application submitted, application form validated for mandatory fields, pre-scoring green, pre-scoring red, application rejected. Any ideas? Someone?
Application submitted.
Application submitted, absolutely. I would say, yeah, those here, those are good candidates for such pivotal events. We'll come back to them. They'll be important later on. Yeah? And then we go into a decomposition. Yeah? And especially based on that event storming knowledge that we have gathered there. Yeah? So we can group things along many concerns. Yeah? We can group stuff by shape, color, text, size. Yeah? Now what's the wrong thing? We don't know. We need to find out. We need to talk to other people and discard the ones that make absolutely no sense. Yeah? So, heuristic here. There is a very high chance that those pivotal events sit at the boundary of a module. Yeah? So, because they are important, maybe they leave the boundary of a module. Yeah? Think about drawing an image. The Mona Lisa, for instance, in the Louvre. Everyone knows the Mona Lisa. Yeah? Do you think it was drawn in the first place as a perfect one? No. Someone sketched out the contours. Yeah? I see a bunch of folks with tattoos in the crowd. Yeah, when you do a tattoo, yeah, you also sketch some lines and so on. You make a draft, and then you finalize these things. Yeah, and that's what we do here with the pivotal events. They are an indicator. Yeah, maybe let's go for that. Let's check this out. Stuff like that. Yeah, and then after we've done that, we check out the swim lanes. We start thinking, hey, maybe those are good candidates for boundaries. So we move towards them. Yeah? Those are not the perfect boundaries. That's a starting point for further discussions, for further refinements. Yeah? And then we move to the bounded context. By definition, the bounded context is the boundary for a domain model expressed in a consistent language tailored around a specific need. That definition sounds really smart, doesn't it? But what does it mean? Let's depict it. I'm pretty sure some of you left the talk yesterday. Maybe I should start a Zoom call as to be in my used habitat. No, left the talk yesterday and thought, what did he mean with that? Let's go into that one. It's a boundary. Every module is a boundary, obviously, isn't it? It should be. Yeah? And within that boundary, we want to be able to learn and master some domain complexity. We want to conduct experiments and learn about the domain. Yeah? And we want to deliver high-value software within that boundary. It's a boundary for a model. And now model, what does the domain-driven design world think about a model? We don't think about data here. We think about behavior, like business rules, decisions, policies. Yeah? So there's a big difference between the classic object-oriented design, which focuses on nouns first, and then attributes. Very often we build a data model with that. Here we focus on verbs first. Think about the event storming stuff. And then we think about rules, behavior. That's expressed in a consistent language. A language has terminology, definitions, and meaning. Now let me ask you a question to get an example for that. What's a tomato? Is it a fruit or a vegetable? What do you think? Fruit. Yeah, that's what botanics say. Yeah, botanical science says tomato is a fruit. However, in the context of cooking, mind that, of cooking, a tomato is often treated as a vegetable. Who wants a tomato in a fruit salad? No one. Yeah. Very strange. Yeah. Now think about US Customs. US Customs had import tariffs on vegetables. What did people do? They imported a lot of tomatoes. Until the US Customs said, we don't care what science says. I mean, who cares about science anyways these days, yeah? We don't care about that. We define the tomato as a vegetable. Another context. Who knows the time management technique Pomodoro? Some raised hands here, yeah? In this context, the tomato represents a unit of 25 minutes of uninterrupted work. Yeah? And now let's go back, way back, yeah, to the time where theater pieces were done at marketplaces. Now, in this context, what was a tomato there that was flying to the stage? Negative feedback. Those are all linguistic contexts, and that's what I want to achieve with that. And then there's this last thing in this definition, purpose. I want to bind that language, those rules, and this specific model to a given purpose. Now, the bounded context is not about building a botanics, US Customs, cooking, time management, feedback tomato. Yeah? Hello, we do that very often under the dry principle, don't we? Yeah? So, you know that example from yesterday. Let me quickly recap that. Those of you who haven't been in the talk yesterday, we just go quickly over that to give a hook point to the ones who were in the talk. Yeah? So, Sergi did some room planning, handled payments, sold tickets. That involved you as visitors to the conference. We can group those concerns. Don't repeat yourself. We know that principle. We love it. And under that principle, we are very often build a boundary around a model like that. Yeah, the batch printing, ticket selling, event management customer that can do everything. Perfect thing. Absolutely reusable. Well, maybe some parts. Let's revisit this definition. Well, this is a boundary to a certain degree. Yeah? Is it a model? We didn't talk about rules yet. It's more a data model, isn't it? Does it have a consistent language? Not so much. And is it tailored around a specific purpose? Hell no. Definitely not. Yeah? This has no purpose at all, and the language is totally generic there. Yeah? Maybe that's a better idea here. So, we tie things to a purpose. We use explicit terminology. Some domain-driven design folks even call themselves domain linguists, yeah, because they take care about these details. Now, you have a ton of terminology on your event storming wall. It's written down there. You just need to read it. Yeah? You can also find misconceptions, unsharpness, abbreviations, and stuff like that. That gives you the chance to ask questions. Hey, what's the difference between an application form, a contract proposal, and a contract? Tell me. Okay. Maybe that's an indicator. Yeah? And then, when you have identified the first candidates for those bounded contexts, based on that. So let me go back to that slide quickly. So for instance, this one here, scoring rule cluster, here, maybe that's an indicator of merging things again. So, okay, we have here two pivotal events, main scoring green-red, pre-scoring green-red. It even contains the term scoring. Maybe we want to define a bounded context for this part and this part, that this is the same thing. Or also those rejections. What do we do that? Is a rejection the same thing as a decision? Maybe a rejection is actually a decision. So those are valuable discussions that we can have there. And the next thing that we can do is we can see how loosely coupled is that stuff. I think we talked, this drives you so far a lot towards cohesion. But how about the coupling, the loose coupling? We need to verify that. And again here, the DDD crew helps you. A guy called Nick Tune, who's amazing. Make sure to follow Nick on Twitter and check out his blog post on Medium. He publishes a lot of good stuff. He brought into place this technique called domain message flow modeling. So we have some bounded context candidates, and then we can check out what messages need to go between them. You can go ahead and say, okay, let's work in a synchronous way, working a lot with queries and commands, like get requests, post requests, put requests, and stuff like that. You can model event-driven architectures with that. And what you can visualize in a way there, how the coupling is between those. If you have a high degree of communication bandwidth, on the coupling side between these things, you may have an indicator that you may want to revisit the bounded contexts you have identified. No one wants a Death Star context that couples to everything, that's bound to everything, because then we don't have this loose coupling idea here. There, with this technique, you can visualize coupling. And as some of you may already see, this is a Miro graphic. There is also a Miro template for that. So if you want to do that, grab the template, start in Miro, and you're good to go. For instance, here is also an example. And you can tell stories on that. And I like this storytelling idea here. So what can we say? Okay, an applicant, over there. An applicant fills an application in the context application entry and check. they submit the application in application entry and check. Application entry and check fires an event application submitted. Yeah? Scoring reacts on that, and sooner or later fires an event pre-scoring green. Then we ask for some documents. Hey, please prove what you have added in that application. Do you really earn 5,000 euros a month? Possible? Prove it. Yeah? And so on. So you can walk through that with the domain experts. And in parallel, you already get a bunch of candidates, maybe for RESTful HTTP APIs, for events that you want to publish through Kafka or whatever, what you want to do. Yeah, you already get some indications for API design there as well, for the module. And this is not technical API design. That's an API design which contains domain stuff, which exposes capabilities. Yeah? Some of you heard me ranting about this get set hell, yeah, in the IDEs yesterday. Yeah? And the same goes with the RESTful HTTP APIs. How many APIs haven't we seen? Get, put, post, delete. Yeah? CRUD APIs. I always tell my customers it would be more honest if you hand the database credentials to the consumers directly. Yeah? You save some latency with the RESTful HTTP API there, yeah, if you do that. Yeah? It may also give you an indication for hypermedia usage. So when can we offer submitting the application? When the application is complete, when everything is in place. Then we can display the submit button. You can indicate that here as well. So, but in a way that is not too technical. So I've seen a bunch of domain experts who have never written a single line of code who were able to contribute on this level and understand this. That's a good thing when you achieve that. Now, let's go further into the definition part. A way that gives you a checkpoint is then the Bounded Context Design Canvas. Again, posted on the DDD Crew GitHub site, available as various templates, PDF, HTML, Miro, whatever. Yeah? And this helps you in asking questions about the module. So, what's the purpose? What terminology is in here? Roughly, which rules do we have in there? Which communication goes into that module? What communication goes out of that module? This helps you in asking questions. And in the end, after you've done that, you also have a very decent piece of documentation for your module as well. Yeah? So you can fill this out. Yeah? The domain message flow example, which I've shown you before, can look like that in a bounded context canvas. And now think about cohesion. You can run a next check on your modularity. Maybe you can dissect certain swim lanes where you have a strict separation in terms of inbound communication, language, rules, outbound communication. If you identify that, you may have a good candidate for splitting this context up into two contexts. Yeah? So that you can also play some games on that, yeah? With questions. Yeah? So we split this up into an application entry context and an application check context. Yeah? So that's very nice stuff. Now, so far, we've done that. Yeah, we have our bounded context candidates. Those are candidates for big modules in a monolithic application or a well-designed monolith. I don't consider a monolith to be a bad thing per se. Yeah? So if you have a very nice modular monolith, those are your candidates there. Those are also candidates for microservices, self-contained systems, so coarse-grained modules. Now let's dig into them and check out the aggregates. Yeah? This is everything from here on, yeah, is already moving heavily into code now. Yeah? This is a movement where we really get to implement things, and everything from here on is inside of a bounded context. So finer grained modules within a microservice, within a module or a vertical slice of a monolith or something like that. Yeah? Now, there are a bunch of patterns in the tactical design world, yeah, in the tactical domain-driven design world. I won't go into detail over all of them, but I want to quickly talk about a bunch of patterns. Entities, value objects, and aggregates, because they are the important ones in terms of modularity. Entities represent core business objects with behavior that have a constant identity and their own life cycle. And a quick note here, your JPA entity is not a domain entity, not a DDD entity, even if some folks claim that. The JPA entity is a data model. It represents usually a table in a database. Some ideas in JPA have been inspired by that. But this is about domain behavior, yeah? And not about database. Separation of concerns. What we want to model here is domain concerns and not database concerns. The same goes for the value object. Yeah? They derive their identity from their values which they have. So let's say I sell this presenter for 100 euros. I won't, yeah, because I need it. I don't care with which 100 euros you pay me that presenter with. I just want 100 euros. And they also don't have their own life cycle. Yeah? So usually when I say, okay, I put a new price tag on it, 80 euros. I remove the old price tag, 100, I put a new one on that. Value objects are always immutable. Yeah? They are also supposed to contain business logic in here. So usually when we model in a bounded context like that, we end up with rather big object graphs. Yeah, they tend to be a little bit error prone sometimes. Yeah, haven't we all seen that yet? You change something at one end of your code base, and at a totally different end of the code base, boom, a bug pops up, and you wonder, whoa, how could that happen? Maybe propagate it a little bit. And those aggregates help you in grouping those entities and value objects together. Yeah, and there are some special things. Each aggregate contains a so-called root entity, which is a special thing. First of all, it's the only allowed entry point and reference point to the aggregate. Think about loose coupling. Usually, I put my aggregates into a package on a code level package. And there is only one class with a public visibility. That's the root entity. Everything else, all other entities, all other value objects are package private. So everything from the outside can only access the root entity. We limit coupling points with that. Yeah? Information hiding. Yeah? The next thing, the root entity is responsible for the lifecycle of the complete aggregate. So it contains the lifecycle. And the third thing, it should act as a facade, like the facade design pattern. It should offer inside a bounded context, for that context, some higher valuable business logic, some business capabilities within that bounded context. Pro tip, never have direct references between your aggregates. Never. They shouldn't know each other. Yeah? So who has read about this principle of connaissance? Maybe in the refactoring world, yeah, some. Yeah, connaissance is a principle in software engineering that says that two components, classes or whatever, are connaissant when you need to change both so that the complete system is able to work. Indicator for a high degree of coupling. I don't want my aggregates to be connaissant. Usually, I want to be able to change them independently of each other. And thereby, we say, okay, don't build direct references between them. Yeah? Now, they usually encapsulate domain concepts by grouping invariants. Those are business rules that need to run together in a consistent fashion. They contain behavior. Yeah? Now, you may wonder, how do I now go ahead and identify aggregates? What are good candidates for identifying aggregate boundaries? There is another type of event storming. You can use event storming for that. There is a type called design level event storming, which is a little bit more complex than the one which I've shown you. A little bit bigger. Yeah? Let me quickly guide you through this. So usually you have a starting point. Yeah, we have this application submitted, which was a pivotal event. We do something against some external systems, and then we have this pre-scoring performed red and green. So we're in the scoring bounded context of our big example, where we want to score a credit application. Now, the first question you ask the domain experts, you want to talk to your domain experts with that. What kind of business rules are there where we can determine if pre-scoring was performed red and green? Tell me the rules. What's there? And then they start explaining, yeah, well, there's a rule, if there's more than 120 points, it's green. If there is a no-go criteria, it's red, and so on. And you write down all of those rules on yellow cards. Heuristic. When your domain experts laugh at you and tell you, hey, it's totally impossible to write down all the business rules for that bounded context, your bounded context is probably too big. Yeah? It's too coarse-grained. Maybe you want to split this up. Yeah? But you write down all the rules, and then you ask the domain experts, hey, how would you group those rules? Are there any ways to group these rules? Which rules have to run together in a consistent fashion? Yeah, so on the one hand, we can go for points, no-go criteria, and determination of a scoring result. Another perspective can be, yeah, we have the determination of a scoring result, but no, we have something that scores the real estate financing, something that scores the monthly cash flow, the applicants, or some credit agency results. Yeah? Now, what's the right grouping here? Everything is right. Every grouping is right. Alan Hollop, a very smart guy from the Agile community, a guy whom I really appreciate, once said the key to an incremental architecture is to build on a framework that can accommodate change. That framework is the domain. By modeling the domain, you can more easily handle changes to the domain. Now, what we want to get is the perspective on the domain from the domain experts. Now, from which perspective do they look at this scoring stuff? Because from that perspective, they will also always give us new feature requests. They don't come out of nothing. Your domain experts and your business folks, they're not sitting in their office and talking in their daily stand-up, oh, how can we torture our developers today? No, they don't wake up like that. Yeah? No, the new requests, the changes that they do, they come from a certain perspective. And I want to have this perspective in code. Yeah? So let's go for that. Yeah? These groups, they are great. Our domain experts say that's the grouping that we have. From my own experience, this is the biggest thing that you can do in terms of maintainable code. You can do as much of clean code practices and whatever, as much as you want. When this stuff doesn't match the perspective of the domain experts, every new feature request will be a wrestling. Yeah? I've seen that countless times happening. And now mind the difference, please. In classical object-oriented analysis and design, OOAD, yeah, there is we start. I still remember when I was at university, we had a book that said, okay, first of all, look for nouns. Those are your classes. Then look for attributes. And after that, look for the methods. What have we built with that? Very, very often. Data models. And not domain models. From that perspective, we very often see classes and modules, private attribute, private attribute, private attribute, and then comes the shortcut from the gates of hell, generate public getters and setters. And don't even get me started with Lombok. Yeah? Yeah? This is an anemic domain model then, yeah, where all the behavior is in some services with really ugly, hard to read code. Yeah? And DDD starts from a different perspective. We start with behavior first. Yeah? I haven't talked about data at all yet. No, we thought about how do we group the rules? How do we derive model boundaries from that? and so on. And what this does, basically, this grouping of the rules that we have there are aggregate boundaries. Yeah? They are good candidates for aggregates. And then, yeah, this is then a full picture. I won't go into a lot of detail here because I don't have the time for that. I could talk 3 days about that stuff, no problem. You can then go ahead and think, which commands do we need for those rules? What data do those rules need? So I derive the data demand from the rules. And which events do they publish? Quick hint to the German-speaking folks here. There is a talk of me on YouTube. I know there are many Germans at that conference in German that talks alone 1 hour about this thing. Yeah, so check this out. That's really good stuff. And let me quickly go back to another thing here. You remember this ubiquitous language idea. Yeah? Let me go back to one slide. Yeah? To this one here. You remember this. And it also said that I want to see that language in the code. Let me quickly give you a quick hint, which just popped out in my head. Question: what can you do code-wise when you're at that stage of a design-level events domain? Do you have any ideas? The idea also contains 2 Ds, not DDD, but TDD. I mean, you can start writing unit tests for each of those rules. Now, when you write those unit tests, try to reflect the language on these cards in the test methods. When you have successfully grouped your rules, when you have decided for which grouping you go for, which aggregates, you regroup your unit tests. And a very nice thing, I sometimes do that with customers, and I show the domain experts the code of the unit tests. Just plain unit testing. No behavior-driven cucumber, whatever stuff. Just the unit tests. When your domain experts are able to read the tests for these, you're doing a pretty good job in terms of ubiquitous language. And do not underestimate the motivating character this has on business folks. Sometimes business folks are scared of IT. Yeah, because they hear all our slang, Kubernetes, Knative, Spring Boot, Spring Data, whatever. Yeah. Oh, what's that? What kind of language do they talk? This gets you in a good conversation, in a meaningful conversation. And when they see, oh, they go home to their families and they say, hey, I read code and I understood that. They feel, we hear this digital natives and so on, yeah, or a karma account, yeah. They feel like they've become 10% more digital. And yeah, I'm joking a bit here, but this is super motivating for many folks. And this leads to a better collaboration between developers and business folks. And that's what we want to have here. And then, yeah, let me quickly move here. Those blue cards, those commands, they are the APIs of your aggregates. They are the public methods of the aggregate. Not get set, blah. No. This is a meaningful API that we have there, which contains business stuff. I like this approach. However, I don't want this to be a plain marketing session here for DDD. Let me quickly talk about some challenges. I'll I'll make that black. Oh, doesn't work. So first challenge, this whole domain-driven design thing is tailored at complex stuff. When you don't have complexity, this is a total overkill. Don't do it. Yeah? Yeah? It's not a silver bullet. A good friend of mine, Jochen Mader, once wrote on Twitter, a good developer is like a werewolf afraid of silver bullets. Yeah? And that's true. This is not a silver bullet. This aims at complex stuff. Yeah? And not trivial stuff which you can implement with Ruby on Rails or whatever. Yeah? And I can do that at a Spring conference. Yeah? But I'm a big Ruby on Rails fan, I have to admit. Yeah? And don't boo me and throw me off the stage here. Yeah? And also, all these workshops, you will need to exercise them. Yeah? Especially this design level event storming, that's not trivial. So maybe you want to add a facilitator to that, who's done that quite a few things, who helps you with the method. But make sure that you get educated on the method. You can do that on your own. Maybe you start off with something super trivial. Hey, let's event storm the purchase of a plane ticket or reservation of a seat in a cinema. Trivial stuff. So that you get fluent with that and be prepared to make mistakes. Domain-driven design is about continuous learning, and continuous learning involves making mistakes. And that's also the reason why this DDD starter modeling process has so many iteration errors. You need to iterate. Your first drafts will not be the perfect thing. And make sure that your management has the right expectation on that. This is an iterative process that you want to do again, 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 and again. Yeah? You may want to do that in areas that are differentiating for your business and not in totally generic stuff, because this is also expensive. Yeah? All right, that's it from my side. So who's interested can check out my DDD book. I also do DDD trainings and consulting if you're interested in that. It's always a pleasure to be at Spring I/O. I think that's my 4th or 5th time at the conference. Always nice to be in Barcelona. So we have some minutes for some questions. But I'll also be around until the mid-afternoon, so you can hit me up at the somewhere in the hall room. And thanks a lot for your interest. Thanks for having me. Thank you.